On Thursday last week, we brought you the news that Community Secretary Michael Gove had kicked into touch plans to demolish and rebuild the flagship Marks and Spencer store on London's Oxford Street over embodied carbon concerns. I said at the time that this was potentially a landmark decision and that it could set a precedent for similar schemes up and down the country. In fact, as it turns out, the decision was so significant that BBC Radio 4 featured the story on its PM show on Friday afternoon. Sadly, the days of BBC impartiality and a willingness to show both sides of the argument are long since past. And so, to discuss the matter, they featured just one man, Jack Pringle of the Royal Institute of British Architects.
Yeah, it is an important decision. Of course, Mr. Gove has hung it both on sustainability and also the proximity to Selfridges, which is a listed building. So it's not just on the sustainability, but nevertheless, I think this is seen as a landmark decision on the sustainability front. The first thing when you have a project of this nature is you have to decide whether there is a case for development. Does the existing building work? Can it be refitted to work, in its current guise in any way at all? And often there's a case for making the building much bigger. There's a need to make the building bigger. We want to densify our cities on sustainability grounds, etc. That can be done in two ways. You can keep the existing structure and extend sometimes, either on the plot or maybe using strengthening foundations and going up. And you can do a calculation over a long period of time how much that reused building is going to use in energy terms, because it's never going to be quite as efficient. That's the calculation you have to do. So beside that first calculation, you have to figure out if we spend all that carbon in demolishing the existing structure and add it to the carbon that a new hyper-efficient building is going to use over a period of time, what's the tipping point? What's the payback period? If it's 5 years, then that's obviously acceptable. If it's 50 years, that's obviously not acceptable. So there are two things that we're missing at the moment. One is an agreed way on how to count the carbon. And the RICS, the surveyors, they've got a proposal, and we're backing that at the RIBA. And the other is, what is an acceptable payback period? Now, the Marks and Spencer published payback period was 11 years. The Inspectorate accepted that, went through a whole number of processes, a number of approvals, and a lot of people thought that was okay. Mr. Gove thinks it's not okay. So the ball is now in play. What is the acceptable payback period?
Now, as I said, I'm past the point of expecting the BBC or any other part of the mainstream media to present a balanced view. But given the magnitude of the decision, its public profile, and its potential impact upon the future of the UK demolition industry, should we not have had a response from the powers that be in the demolition sector by now? This is an issue that is gaining traction and momentum, and it's doing so across the media and in the nation's corridors of power. And yet, as an industry, we continue to stand idly by while the demolition industry is undermined, while its environmental credentials are overlooked, and while valuable projects are rejected, apparently on a whim.